The Mountain Inside, A Journey of Becoming. Part 1. The Whisper of More. The sun rose quietly over the sleepy town of Willow Glen, where the rhythm of life was as predictable as the chime of the church bell every Sunday morning. Nestled between quiet fields and misty woods, Willow Glen was a place where everyone knew each other's name, where ambitions rarely stretched beyond the town limits. For Elena Carter, the youngest daughter of a grocery store owner and a former school teacher, life in Willow Glen was safe, but safety was not what her heart longed for. She first heard the whisper when she was 11, sitting in the back of Mrs. Lanning's science class. They had just watched a documentary about doctors working in refugee camps, treating patients under makeshift tents and dusty skies. Elena sat transfixed, her pencil frozen mid-word, her mind ablaze. After the class, she approached Mrs. Lanning with uncharacteristic boldness. "Do you think someone from Willow Glen could ever do something like that?" Elena asked. Mrs. Lanning looked at her, eyes soft behind her spectacles. "Why not? Every doctor started somewhere, and you, Elena, you ask the kind of questions doctors ask. The seed was planted, but dreams, like seeds, require courage to water them, especially when the soil around them says, 'Stay where you are.'" At home, things were different. Her parents, loving but practical, saw Elena's dream as something noble but unrealistic. "You're smart, sweetheart," her mother would say as she stirred stew in the kitchen. "But medical school? That's a lot of money, a lot of years." Her father, gruff but kind, added, "We'd be proud if you became a teacher like your mother. That's steady work, good work." Elena nodded, but the whisper inside her grew louder. It spoke to her in biology books borrowed from the library, in the aching hope she saw in her neighbor's eyes when someone got sick and had to be driven an hour away for care. She felt it strongest in the silence, when she was alone, when the world was quiet, and all that remained was the persistent echo of more. Part 2. The Edge of Comfort. High school passed like a dream Elena was half awake in, filled with good grades, quiet days, and an undercurrent of something unfulfilled. She was the kind of student teachers liked, attentive, respectful, always prepared. But what set her apart was her hunger for understanding, not just for answers. She joined the science club, volunteered at the local nursing home, and shadowed the town's one doctor, Dr. Kim, every Thursday afternoon. It was there, in the tiny clinic behind Main Street Pharmacy, that Elena first held a stethoscope to a child's chest and listened to a heartbeat that was not her own. "It's like hearing life from the inside," she whispered. Dr. Kim smiled. "That's a good way to put it. Medicine is more listening than fixing." The world seemed to open to her in layers. With every medical article she read, every patient she observed, her dream crystallized into something solid. It was no longer a vague hope, it was a calling. But the path forward was steep. When college acceptance letters arrived in senior year, Elena held one from a top university in her hands: full scholarship, pre-med program, mentorship opportunities. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Her heart soared, then sank, because her parents weren't smiling. "You'll be so far from home," her mother said softly, folding laundry in the next room. "You'll have debt, stress, and no guarantee," her father muttered. Elena sat silently at the dinner table that night. Her little brother pushed peas around on his plate, watching the tension unfold like a scene he didn't understand, but felt deeply. And so, that night, Elena walked into the woods behind their house. She followed the trail they used to hike every fall, past the trees that knew her name, up to the lookout they called Bluebird Hill. She stood on the edge, wind biting her cheeks, stars hanging like promises overhead. And she made a decision. She would go. Even if no one believed she could. Even if she didn't quite believe it herself. Sometimes the mountain inside you grows higher the closer you get to it. But Elena had begun to climb. Part 3, falling and beginning again. College was everything and nothing like Elena expected. Her first semester was a whirlwind of giant lecture halls, professors who didn't know her name, and textbooks that cost more than her weekly groceries. For someone who had always excelled in a small classroom surrounded by support, the anonymity hit hard. Worse, her first biology exam came back with a C. It felt like a punch to the gut. She stared at the grade in disbelief, willing it to change. But it stayed there, stubborn, permanent. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the top of the class. She wasn't even near the middle. She called home that night, voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. Her father's voice was quiet. "Elena, maybe it's not too late to change paths. Come home. You'd have a place here." There was no judgment in his tone, just love and a way out. But Elena didn't want out. She wanted through. So she hung up the phone and cried into her pillow. Then slowly she wiped her tears and opened her notebook again. She rewrote her biology notes, every word, every diagram. She watched extra lectures online. She formed a study group, even though it terrified her to speak up. Bit by bit, she learned to fall and rise. The next exam, a B+, then an A. She still missed home, especially during the holidays when dorms emptied out and her classmates flew off to warm kitchens and welcoming arms. Elena stayed behind, working part-time at the campus cafe and volunteering at the student-run free clinic on weekends. It was at the clinic where she met Mrs. Rosario, an elderly woman with diabetes who didn't speak much English and had stopped taking her medication. Elena sat with her for nearly an hour, using gestures, a Spanish phrase book, and simple drawings. She learned the woman hadn't filled her prescription because she couldn't afford the bus fare to the pharmacy, so Elena walked it there for her. That day, something shifted in Elena. She realized medicine wasn't just about knowledge, it was about connection, about seeing people not as cases, but as stories. She didn't need to be the smartest in the room. She needed to be the most human. Part 4, When the Wind Turns Cold. By her third year of college, Elena was finally finding her rhythm. She had completed organic chemistry, passed anatomy with only one meltdown, and even started mentoring a few freshmen who reminded her of herself. Wide-eyed, scared, and unsure if they belonged. She still worked at the cafe and still sent a bit of her paycheck home whenever she could. Her father's back wasn't what it used to be, and her mother had taken up sewing jobs again. But despite the hard days, Elena felt something she hadn't in years, certainty. She was on the right path. Then came the call. She was walking out of the clinic on a chilly November afternoon when her phone buzzed. Her brother's name flashed on the screen. "Elena," he said, voice too calm. "Dad's in the hospital. A heart attack. Severe, but not fatal." She caught the next bus home. The trees were already bare, the sky a faded gray. In the hospital room, her father looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that scared her. "Hey, Doc," he joked weakly when she walked in. She smiled and sat beside him. "Don't ever do that again." He gave a faint laugh, then said softly, "I'm proud of you, you know. I always was. I just didn't want you to get hurt." Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I had to get hurt. That's how I knew it mattered." She stayed a week at home, helping where she could. When she returned to campus, she was behind in everything: labs, assignments, and sleep. But she carried something with her now, a fire lit by fragility. She poured herself into her work, not out of fear, but with new purpose. The time we have is not guaranteed. If you can help others live a little longer, love a little harder, how could you not try? One evening, a professor pulled her aside after class. "I read your paper on community-based care," he said. "Have you ever considered applying for a summer program abroad? There's one in Nairobi. You'd be perfect for it." Elena blinked. "Nairobi, Kenya?" "Yes," she said before she could doubt herself. "I'd love to." And just like that, the girl who once stood trembling at the edge of her dreams took one step closer to becoming the woman who would live them. Part 5. In the Heart of the World. Nairobi was heat, dust, color, and movement. It was Elena's first time outside the country, and everything about it overwhelmed her. The bustling markets, the sounds of languages she couldn't yet understand, the red clay roads, and the wide skies that made her feel both impossibly small and immeasurably alive. She lived with a host family in a modest home that smelled of spices and kindness. Her mornings were spent in a local health clinic, assisting doctors, learning by watching, and sometimes just by listening. Her afternoons were filled with community outreach, visiting villages, helping with vaccinations, delivering supplies. It wasn't glamorous work. Sometimes the electricity failed, sometimes there wasn't enough gauze or enough time, but there were children who laughed, mothers who cried with relief, and hands that gripped hers in gratitude. There were stories, dozens of them, that taught Elena more about medicine, resilience, and humanity than any textbook ever could. One afternoon, she met a young girl named Amina, no older than 10, who had walked 6 kilometers with her grandmother to be seen. The girl had a fever and a chest infection that, left untreated, could have become deadly. As Elena held the stethoscope to her chest, Amina looked up and asked in soft, practiced English, "Are you a doctor?" Elena hesitated. "Not yet," she said, smiling, "but I will be." Amina grinned. "Good. Then come back." That night, Elena wrote in her journal, "For the first time, I feel like I am becoming what I was meant to be. Not just learning medicine, but carrying it with care. I understand now it was never about being perfect. It's about being present." Before she left Kenya, the clinic staff held a small farewell gathering. One of the nurses, Mama Ruth, hugged her tightly and whispered, "Don't let the world make you hard. Keep this heart, this softness. It's your gift." When Elena returned home, something had shifted. She no longer doubted herself the way she once had. The whispers of self-doubt were still there, but they were quieter now, drowned out by the voices of those who had trusted her, leaned on her, believed in her. She finished her undergraduate degree with honors, applied to medical school, waited some more. And then, one morning, while making coffee in her tiny apartment, her email chimed. Subject, acceptance letter, School of Medicine. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply sat down, heart pounding, and whispered, "I made it." Part 6. The Summit and the Start. Medical school was the steepest climb yet. The hours were brutal. The stakes were real. There were days when Elena's hands shook from exhaustion, and nights when the only thing keeping her going was the memory of Amina's voice, or her father's quiet pride, or the trembling heartbeat she once heard through a stethoscope as a teenager in Willow Glen. She failed her first attempt at suturing a wound. She froze during her first simulated code blue, but each time she came back. She asked questions, stayed late, practiced until her hands no longer trembled. Her mentors noticed. Patients remembered her name. And little by little, the girl who once stood at the edge of the world became a woman who could carry others through it. In her final year, she chose to specialize in family medicine with a focus on underserved communities. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. She returned to Willow Glen the summer before her residency began. The grocery store hadn't changed. The old trees still lined Main Street. But as she walked through town, people greeted her differently now. "Dr. Carter," Mrs. Lanning called from the library steps, beaming. She blushed. "Just Elena for now." Her father stood taller beside her, his hands healed but his eyes softer. Her mother framed the acceptance letter, hung it on the living room wall like a painting. At the church, Elena was invited to speak at the youth group one Sunday evening. She stood at the front, the same girl who once whispered her dreams to the sky, and now stood before a room full of curious, quiet faces. "I used to think bravery meant being fearless," she began, "but now I know it means hearing the fear and going forward anyway. There will be times you feel like you don't belong, that you're not good enough, smart enough, strong enough. Go anyway." She looked around the room and smiled. "There's a mountain inside each of us. Not everyone will see it, but if you climb step by step, someday someone else will see your summit and believe they can climb too." Epilogue. Years later, Dr. Elena Carter would open a community clinic in a small town much like Willow Glen. She'd return to Nairobi to teach. She'd mentor students who came from nowhere with nothing but heart. And when asked what her greatest achievement was, she would never mention the degrees or awards or the white coat with her name stitched in fine thread. She would simply say, "I never gave up on who I was becoming." The end.